Picture this. You walk into your own office building on a Monday morning, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another week of growing the business you built from scratch, only to discover that your key card no longer works. The security guard looks at you with confusion and tells you that according to his records, you don't work here anymore. Through the glass doors, you can see your business partner presenting to clients in the conference room you helped design, using the strategies you developed, acting as if you never existed. That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago. And if you think that's shocking, wait until you hear what I discovered next. My name is Sophia Chen, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my closest friend and business partner tried to erase me from the company we built together, and how I turned the tables in a way she never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Sophia Chen, a 32-year-old digital marketing strategist. From Portland, Oregon, and until 4 months ago, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I thought it was the obvious stuff you see in movies: dramatic confrontations, angry shouting matches, clear lines drawn in the sand. I never imagined that real betrayal would come wrapped in concerned text messages and friendly smiles, delivered by someone who had been my closest friend for over 8 years. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in late September. I had just returned from a long weekend visiting my grandmother in Sacramento, where I'd spent 3 days helping her recover from a minor surgery. The trip had been planned for months, and my business partner, Megan Walsh, had insisted she could handle everything while I was away. We'd done this before, covering for each other during family emergencies, vacation time, or when one of us was swamped with client work. It was one of the things I loved most about our partnership. We had each other's backs, or so I believed. I remember pulling into the parking garage of our office building on West Burnside, feeling refreshed and ready to dive back into work. We had 3 major client presentations that week, including a huge pitch to Columbia Sportswear that could potentially double our annual revenue. I was excited to hear how Megan's preliminary meeting with their marketing director had gone while I was away. The first sign something was wrong came when I tried to badge into the building. The little red light blinked at me mockingly, and I heard that familiar beep that meant access denied. I figured it was just a technical glitch. These keycards were always acting up. I tried again and again, until finally approaching the security desk where Gary, the morning guard who always greeted me with a cheerful wave, looked at me with genuine confusion. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice uncertain, "I'm showing here that your access was revoked yesterday. Are you sure you're supposed to be here today?" The words hit me like ice water. Revoked access. Yesterday. While I was 3 states away, helping my grandmother navigate her post-surgery medications and making sure she had enough groceries for the week. "There has to be some mistake," I told Gary, my voice steady even though my heart was starting to race. "I'm the co-founder of Bloom Digital Marketing, Suite 412. Megan Walsh is my business partner. Can you call up to her?" Gary nodded sympathetically and picked up his phone. I could hear him speaking quietly, mentioning my name, and then a long pause. When he hung up, his expression was even more confused than before. "Miss Chen, I'm really sorry, but Miss Walsh says she's in an important client meeting and can't be disturbed. She also mentioned that there might be some employment changes happening that she'll need to discuss with you later." Employment changes. The phrase echoed in my head as I stood there in the marble lobby of a building where I'd worked every day for the past 3 years. Employment changes, as if I were some junior associate who could be hired and fired at will, not the person who had co-founded the company, developed our core service offerings, and personally managed our biggest client accounts. I thanked Gary and walked back to my car in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe there had been some kind of legal issue while I was away. Maybe we were restructuring the business for tax purposes. Maybe Megan was planning some kind of surprise, and this was all a misunderstanding that would be cleared up with a phone call. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge yet, I knew something was terribly wrong. I drove to the Stumptown coffee shop 3 blocks away from our office, the same place where Megan and I had spent countless mornings in our early days, laptops open, splitting a single pastry because we couldn't afford 2, dreaming about the company we were going to build. I ordered my usual, a cortado with an extra shot, and tried calling Megan's cell phone, straight to voicemail. I tried her office line. The receptionist, Julie, answered in her usual bright tone, but when I identified myself, there was an awkward pause. "Oh, hi, Sophia. Megan is in meetings all day today. Should I take a message?" Should she take a message? From me. The person who had hired Julie 8 months ago and had been signing her paychecks ever since. "Julie," I said carefully, "this is important. Can you please tell me what's going on? Why was my access card deactivated?" Another pause, longer this time. "Sophia, I think you really need to talk to Megan about this. I'm not supposed to. I mean, I don't think I should." She was trying to be kind, but I could hear the discomfort in her voice. Whatever was happening, it was big enough that our 22-year-old receptionist had been given instructions about how to handle calls from me. I hung up and sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours, trying to make sense of what was happening. I pulled up our business bank account on my phone, access denied. Our shared Google Drive, access denied. Even our company Instagram account, which I had created and managed since day 1, was showing an error message when I tried to log in. Megan wasn't just keeping me out of the office. She was systematically locking me out of every digital aspect of our business. That's when I started to understand that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a technical glitch. This was deliberate. This was planned. And it had been executed while I was 3 states away, taking care of family, trusting that my business partner and closest friend would hold everything together until I returned. The realization felt like drowning in slow motion. 3 years of 14-hour days, of building something from nothing, of sacrificing weekends and holidays and social events to grow our client base and establish our reputation in Portland's competitive marketing landscape. 3 years of splitting everything 50-50, of making every major decision together, of celebrating wins and weathering setbacks as a team. And Megan had erased me in 3 days. I tried to think back to our last conversation before I left for Sacramento. Had there been any signs? Any hints that she was planning something like this? We had talked on Friday afternoon about the Columbia sportswear presentation, dividing up the prep work and agreeing on our strategy. She had seemed normal, excited about the opportunity, confident about our pitch, supportive of my need to help my grandmother. The only thing that seemed slightly off was how quickly she had volunteered to handle everything while I was away. Usually, when one of us traveled for personal reasons, we would spend at least an hour going through our active projects, making sure nothing would fall through the cracks. But this time, Megan had waved away my attempts to brief her thoroughly. "Don't worry about it, Soph," she had said, using the nickname only she called me. "I've got everything under control. You just focus on your grandmother and let me handle the business side of things." At the time, I had been grateful for her understanding and flexibility. Now, sitting in that coffee shop with my phone full of denied access messages, I realized she hadn't been being understanding. She had been getting me out of the way. I spent the rest of that afternoon trying to reach Megan through every channel I could think of. Email, text, phone calls, even messaging her on LinkedIn. Nothing. It was as if I had suddenly become invisible to the person who had been my daily collaborator for 3 years. By evening, I was desperate enough to drive by our office building. The lights were on in our suite, and I could see figures moving around inside, but I couldn't get past the lobby. Gary's afternoon shift replacement was less sympathetic than Gary himself, and he made it clear that without proper access credentials, I wouldn't be allowed upstairs. I went home to my apartment in the Pearl District, the same neighborhood where Megan and I had started Bloom Digital Marketing on my dining room table 3 years ago. I sat on my couch, surrounded by the artwork and furniture I had bought with money from our early client successes, and tried to process what was happening to my life. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from Megan, the first communication I'd received from her since I'd left for Sacramento. "Hey, Sophia. I know today was confusing, and I'm sorry about that. Can we meet tomorrow morning to talk? There are some business decisions we need to discuss. How about Cafe Vita on Pearl at 9 a.m.? I stared at that message for a long time. The casual tone, the vague language about business decisions, the suggestion to meet at a public place rather than our office. Everything about it felt calculated and cold. Nothing like the warm, direct communication style I had known Megan to have. I typed and deleted a dozen different responses. Part of me wanted to demand immediate answers, to insist she explain why I had been locked out of my own company. Part of me wanted to keep things professional and wait to hear her side of the story. Part of me still hoped this was all some kind of terrible misunderstanding. Finally, I sent back a simple, "See you at 9." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying every conversation Megan and I had shared over the past few months, looking for clues I might have missed. Had she been planning this for weeks? Months? Had our entire friendship been a facade, a long game designed to position her to take over the company when the timing was right? The questions multiplied in the darkness, each one more disturbing than the last. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If Megan could deceive me so completely about something this fundamental, what else had she been hiding? How long had she been viewing our partnership as a temporary arrangement rather than the permanent collaboration I thought we had built? By morning, I was exhausted, but resolved. Whatever Megan was planning to tell me at Cafe Vita, I would listen calmly and professionally. I would gather as much information as possible, and then I would figure out how to fight back. Because one thing had become crystal clear during that sleepless night. I wasn't going to let 3 years of my life's work disappear without a fight. Megan might have caught me off guard, but she had underestimated the depth of my commitment to the company we had built together. She was about to learn that locking me out of the office was just the beginning of this story, not the end. I arrived at Cafe Vita 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could see the entrance and have some privacy for what I suspected would be a difficult conversation. The morning rush was in full swing, with Portland's coffee culture providing the perfect backdrop of ambient noise and bustling energy. I ordered my usual cortado and sat there, watching successful-looking people in business attire hurrying past the windows, carrying their laptops and phones, living their normal Tuesday morning lives while mine was falling apart. When Megan walked through the door at exactly 9 o'clock, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the casual, collaborative partner I had worked alongside for 3 years. In her place stood someone who looked like she had stepped out of a corporate boardroom, a charcoal gray power suit I had never seen before, her hair styled in a sleek chignon rather than her usual messy bun, and she was carrying a leather briefcase that definitely wasn't the canvas messenger bag she normally used. She spotted me immediately and walked over with a confident stride that seemed practiced, rehearsed. When she sat down across from me, she didn't hug me hello or ask how my grandmother was doing. Instead, she placed her briefcase on the table, between us like a barrier, and folded her hands in her lap. "Sophia," she said, her voice taking on a tone I had never heard from her before. Formal, distant, almost like she was reading from a script. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Short notice, as if we hadn't been business partners for 3 years, as if I hadn't been locked out of my own company less than 24 hours ago. "Megan," I replied, keeping my voice steady, despite the confusion and hurt that was building in my chest. "I think you need to explain what happened yesterday. Why couldn't I get into the office? Why are all my access credentials disabled?" She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, placing it on the table but not opening it. Yet. Her movements were deliberate, calculated, nothing like the impulsive, spontaneous person I thought I knew. Sophia, I want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly. I've been thinking about the direction of our company for months now, and I've come to the conclusion that we need to restructure our partnership arrangement. Restructure our partnership arrangement. The corporate speak sent a chill down my spine. This was not the Megan who used to text me at midnight with random business ideas, or who would show up at my apartment with Thai takeout when we were stressed about a big presentation. What exactly does that mean? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew. Megan opened the folder and slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. I'm prepared to offer you a buyout of your equity stake in Bloom Digital. Marketing. The terms are quite generous, considering the current market conditions and the challenges we've been facing with client retention. I stared at the papers without picking them up. The words seemed to blur together on the page, but I could make out enough to understand what I was looking at, a legal document that would essentially erase my ownership of the company I had co-founded. Client retention challenges? I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Megan, we have a 92% client retention rate. We're booked solid through the end of the year. What challenges are you talking about? She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable for the first time since she'd sat down. Well, there have been some concerns raised about consistency in our service delivery. Some clients have expressed frustration with communication gaps and delayed project timelines. I felt like I was in an alternate universe. Communication gaps? Delayed timelines? I was the one who maintained detailed project management systems, who sent weekly progress reports to every client, who had never missed a deadline in 3 years of operation. Which clients? I asked directly. Give me specific examples. Megan's composure flickered for just a moment. I don't think getting into the details of individual client feedback is productive right now. The important thing is that I've identified some operational inefficiencies that I believe can be better addressed with a single point of leadership. Single point of leadership. She was talking about removing me from the company entirely, and she was doing it with the kind of corporate jargon that made it sound like a rational business decision rather than a personal betrayal. Megan, I said, leaning forward and trying to catch her eyes, which seemed to be focused everywhere except on my face. What is really going on here? This isn't about operational inefficiencies or client feedback. We've been friends for 8 years. We built this company together. Talk to me like a human being, not like I'm some stranger you're trying to push out of a boardroom. For a brief moment, I saw a flash of the person I thought I knew. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she looked directly at me for the first time since she'd sat down. But then she seemed to catch herself, straightening up and returning to her corporate persona. Sophia, I understand this is difficult, but I need you to understand that this is strictly business. Personal feelings can't factor into decisions that affect the future of the company. The irony was almost laughable. Personal feelings couldn't factor into business decisions, but apparently personal ambition could factor into stealing someone's life work. How long have you been planning this? I asked quietly. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the answer I didn't want to acknowledge. This hadn't been a sudden decision made while I was in Sacramento. This had been carefully orchestrated, probably for weeks or even months. I've been evaluating our business structure for some time, she said finally. Your trip to Sacramento simply provided an opportunity to implement some necessary changes. Necessary changes, implemented while I was caring for my sick grandmother, 3 states away and completely unaware that my business partner was systematically dismantling my access to our company. I picked up the buyout papers and flipped through them quickly. The number at the bottom was insultingly low, barely enough to cover what I had personally invested in the business over the past 3 years, let alone compensation for the sweat, equity, and unpaid hours I had contributed to building our client base and reputation. "This is your idea of generous?" I asked, holding up the document. "It's a fair market valuation based on current assets and projected revenue," Megan replied, but I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Fair market valuation," I repeated slowly. "Megan, I personally brought in 60% of our current client base. I developed our signature service packages. I created our project management systems from scratch. And you're offering me less than what some of our clients pay us for a single campaign." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with something internally. Finally, she spoke, and for the first time that morning, she sounded like the person I used to know. "Sophia, you have to understand. I can't keep living in your shadow. Do you know what it's like to go to networking events and have people assume you're my assistant? To have clients specifically request to work with you instead of me? To feel like I'm the junior partner in a company I co-founded?" There it was. The real reason behind the corporate restructuring and the generous buyout offers and the sudden operational inefficiencies. Megan wasn't trying to save the company from some imaginary crisis. She was trying to save her ego from the reality of our working relationship. "Megan," I said softly, "I never tried to overshadow you. I never positioned myself as the senior partner. We were supposed to be equals." "But we weren't equals, were we?" She shot back, some of her polished composure finally cracking. "You were the strategic genius, and I was the one who made sure we had coffee in the break room and remembered to pay the electric bill on time." I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the resentment in her voice. "That's not true, and you know it. You handled all our business development. You were the one who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 3 new client prospects. I could never do what you do." "But what I do isn't valued the same way, is it?" she continued, her voice getting stronger and more bitter. "When we win awards or get featured in industry publications, they always want to interview you about strategy and innovation. When we're at client meetings, they direct their questions to you. Even our own employees come to you first when they have problems or ideas." I wanted to argue with her, to point out all the ways she was wrong. But as I sat there listening to her pour out months or maybe years of accumulated frustration, I realized that some of what she was saying might be true. Not because I had intentionally marginalized her, but because our natural strengths had led us into complementary roles that she now viewed as hierarchical. The problem was, instead of talking to me about feeling undervalued or overlooked, she had decided to solve the problem by removing me entirely. "So, your solution is to steal the company?" I asked. "I'm not stealing anything," she said back, to her corporate tone. "I'm offering to buy out your stake at fair market value. You're free to start your own competing business if you choose." Free to start my own competing business. As if 3 years of relationship building and reputation establishing could be easily replicated. As if losing half of my life's work was some kind of generous gift. I gathered up the buyout papers and stood up from the table. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," Megan said, but I could hear the impatience in her voice. "I'll need an answer by Friday, though. We have the Columbia Sportswear presentation next week, and I need to know how we're moving forward." The Columbia Sportswear presentation. The one I had been developing strategy for over the past month. The one that could potentially transform our entire business trajectory. Of course she needed to know how we were moving forward. "I'll be in touch," I said, and walked out of the cafe without looking back. Driving home from that devastating coffee meeting, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to how different everything had been just 3 years ago. The contrast was so stark, it felt like remembering someone else's life. A parallel universe where Megan Walsh was my closest friend and most trusted collaborator, rather than the cold stranger who had just tried to buy me out of my own company. It was the spring of 2021, and I had just been laid off from my position as a senior marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising agency downtown. The layoffs had been presented as pandemic-related cost-cutting measures, but I suspected they had more to do with the agency's reluctance to promote women into leadership positions. After 18 months of being passed over for the creative director role despite consistently outperforming my male colleagues, the severance package almost felt like a relief. Megan and I had maintained our friendship from college, getting together every few months for drinks or dinner, commiserating about the challenges of working in Portland's competitive marketing landscape. She was struggling too, stuck in an account management role at a digital agency where she felt undervalued and underpaid. We had both reached that point in our late 20s, where we were tired of making other people money while our own creative visions went unrealized. I remember the exact moment the idea for Bloom Digital Marketing was born. We were sitting on my tiny balcony on a warm May evening, sharing a bottle of wine and venting about our respective work frustrations. Megan had just finished telling me about a client presentation where her boss had taken credit for her ideas, and I was describing how my former agency had lost a major account because they refused to implement the social media strategy I had proposed. "You know what's crazy?" Megan said, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "Between the two of us, we probably have more combined experience and better instincts than half the people running agencies in this city." "Absolutely," I agreed. "You understand client relationships better than anyone I've ever worked with, and I know I can develop strategies that actually work. We should just start our own thing." It was one of those throwaway comments that people make all the time. Someday we should open a restaurant, someday we should write a book, someday we should start our own business. Except this time, instead of laughing and moving on to the next topic, we both went quiet and looked at each other with growing excitement. "Are you serious?" Megan asked. "I think I am," I replied. And suddenly we were both talking at once, interrupting each other with ideas and possibilities that had been building in our minds for months, or maybe years. The next 3 hours flew by as we outlined what would eventually become Bloom Digital Marketing. Megan would handle business development, client relations, and project management. I would focus on strategy development, campaign creation, and performance analysis. We would split everything 50-50: profits, decision-making, ownership, responsibility. Most importantly, we would build the kind of agency we had always wanted to work for. One that valued creativity over politics, results over presentations, and authentic relationships over networking manipulation. We would work with clients who genuinely wanted to grow their businesses, not just impress their investors or boost their egos. By the end of that evening, we had a business name, a rough service structure, and a pact to give ourselves 6 months to see if we could make it work. If we failed, we would at least fail doing something we believed in, rather than slowly dying in jobs that didn't appreciate our contributions. The early days were exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. We pooled our savings to cover basic business expenses and spent weeks crafting our brand identity, service packages, and marketing materials. Megan transformed into a networking powerhouse, attending every Chamber of Commerce event, startup meetup, and industry conference in the Portland area. She had this natural ability to make people feel heard and understood, to ask the right questions that would reveal their real business challenges rather than just their surface concerns. Meanwhile, I dove deep into research, analyzing local market trends, studying our potential competitors, and developing innovative service offerings that would differentiate us from the dozens of other marketing agencies competing for the same clients. I created detailed process documents for everything from initial client consultations to final campaign reporting, ensuring that every client would receive the same high level of service regardless of which one of us was leading their account. Our first client came through a connection of Megan's, a small bakery in the Hawthorne district that was struggling to compete with the artisanal bread shops that seemed to be opening on every corner. The owner, Lisa, was a middle-aged woman who had been running the bakery for 15 years, but had never needed to think about marketing beyond word of mouth and a simple website. I still remember our first meeting with Lisa, sitting around one of her cafe tables at 7 in the morning before the bakery opened, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and coffee. She was nervous about spending money on marketing, worried that digital advertising was too complicated for someone like her to understand, and skeptical that anyone could help her compete with businesses that had much larger budgets. Megan was brilliant in that meeting. She asked Lisa about her customers, her favorite aspects of running the bakery, her dreams for the business's future. She listened without taking notes, making genuine eye contact, and responding with empathy and understanding. By the end of the conversation, Lisa wasn't talking to a marketing consultant. She was talking to someone who genuinely cared about her success. Then it was my turn to present the strategy I had developed. Instead of overwhelming Lisa with industry jargon and complex analytics, I focused on telling the story of what made her bakery special. Her recipes had been passed down through 3 generations of her family. She knew the names of her regular customers and their usual orders. She donated day-old bread to the local homeless shelter every evening. The campaign I proposed wasn't about competing with the trendy new bakeries on budget or aesthetics. It was about highlighting the authentic community connections and family traditions that the newer places couldn't replicate. Social media content featuring customer stories, behind-the-scenes videos of Lisa preparing her grandmother's recipes, partnerships with local nonprofits that aligned with her values. Within 3 months, Lisa's revenue had increased by 35%. More importantly, she felt confident and excited about her marketing efforts for the first time in years. She started referring other small business owners to us, and our client base began growing through authentic word-of-mouth recommendations. That first success established the pattern that would define Bloom digital marketing for the next 3 years. Megan would build relationships and understand client needs on a deep, personal level. I would translate those needs into strategic campaigns that produced measurable results. Together, we created something that was greater than the sum of our individual contributions. Our office space evolved along with our client base. We started at my dining room table, then moved to a shared workspace in Southeast Portland, and finally leased our own suite in the West Burnside building that had felt so much like home until yesterday morning. Each move represented not just business growth, but the deepening of our partnership and friendship. I loved the rhythm of our collaboration. Monday morning strategy sessions where we would review the previous week's campaign performance and plan upcoming client work. Wednesday afternoon brainstorming sessions where we would tackle challenging projects together, building on each other's ideas until we arrived at solutions neither of us could have developed alone. Friday evening celebrations where we would order pizza and review our accomplishments for the week, already excited about the projects waiting for us on Monday. Megan and I developed our own language for discussing clients and campaigns. We had inside jokes about industry trends and competitor strategies. We knew each other's coffee orders, work habits, and stress responses. When one of us was having a difficult day, the other would automatically step in to provide support or take on additional responsibilities. More than business partners, we had become creative collaborators and close friends. We celebrated each other's personal milestones. Megan's promotion to board member of the Portland Marketing Association, my acceptance into a competitive leadership development program, both of our birthdays and professional achievements. I trusted Megan completely. With client relationships, financial decisions, strategic planning, and the day-to-day operations that kept our business running smoothly. When I needed to travel for family emergencies or personal commitments, I never worried about leaving the business in her hands. When she needed time off for her own priorities, I gladly covered her responsibilities without question. That trust had been built over thousands of small interactions and collaborative decisions. Late-night phone calls, when we were struggling with a difficult client situation. Honest conversations about our individual strengths and weaknesses, shared sacrifices when we needed to invest profits back into business growth rather than paying ourselves higher salaries. Looking back now, I wonder if there were signs I missed. moments when Megan seemed frustrated or resentful that I didn't recognize at the time, comments about client preferences or industry recognition that I interpreted as casual observations rather than building resentment. But as I sat in my car outside my apartment building, still processing the cold stranger who had tried to buy me out of my own company that morning, I couldn't identify any clear warning signs. The Megan I thought I knew had been genuinely supportive of my contributions to our partnership. She had celebrated my strategic successes and relied on my expertise for complex client challenges. Either I had been completely blind to her true feelings for 3 years, or something had changed recently that transformed my collaborative partner into someone willing to systematically erase me from our shared business. Both possibilities were equally disturbing, and neither offered much comfort as I tried to figure out how to respond to the situation I found myself in. The months following our first client success with Lisa's Bakery felt like a masterclass in collaborative entrepreneurship. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities, and Megan and I tackled them with an enthusiasm and partnership that I had never experienced in any previous job. We weren't just building a business. We were creating something that reflected our shared values and vision for what marketing could be when it was done with integrity and genuine care for client success. Our client roster grew organically, almost entirely through referrals from satisfied customers who appreciated the personal attention and measurable results we delivered. Lisa introduced us to her friend Marcus, who owned a small bookstore in the Alberta Arts District that was struggling to compete with online retailers. Marcus led us to Sarah, who had recently opened a sustainable clothing boutique and needed help communicating her brand values to environmentally conscious consumers. Each new client presented unique challenges that pushed us to develop innovative solutions. Marcus needed strategies that would drive foot traffic to his physical store, while also building an online presence that could compete with Amazon's convenience. Sarah required messaging that would resonate with conscious consumers without alienating budget-minded shoppers who might not prioritize sustainability. I thrived on these complex strategic puzzles. I would spend hours researching target demographics, analyzing competitor approaches, and developing multi-channel campaigns that addressed each client's specific goals and constraints. But what made the work truly satisfying was seeing how Megan translated my strategic frameworks into genuine client relationships. She had an incredible gift for making people feel understood and valued. During client meetings, she would remember details about their families, their hobbies, their concerns that had nothing to do with marketing. She knew that Marcus was worried about his teenage daughter's college expenses, that Sarah was planning her wedding while launching her business, that Lisa was caring for her elderly mother while managing the bakery. This emotional intelligence wasn't just good customer service, it was strategic business development. Clients didn't just trust us with their marketing budgets, they trusted us with their dreams and fears about their businesses. When we recommended a strategy adjustment or proposed a new campaign approach, they listened because they knew we understood what success meant to them personally. Our complementary strengths created a client experience that our competitors couldn't replicate. Larger agencies might have more resources or more impressive office spaces, but they couldn't match the personal attention and strategic customization we provided. Smaller freelancers might offer competitive pricing, but they couldn't deliver the comprehensive service packages that addressed every aspect of a client's marketing needs. As our reputation grew, we started attracting clients with larger budgets and more complex challenges. A regional restaurant chain that wanted to expand into new markets. A technology startup that needed to establish thought leadership in a crowded industry. A family-owned manufacturing company that was transitioning from B2B sales to direct consumer marketing. Each success story reinforced our confidence in our business model and our partnership. We were proving that it was possible to build a profitable marketing agency without compromising our values or sacrificing the quality of our work. We were also demonstrating that our individual strengths were amplified when we worked together rather than competing against each other. By the end of our second year, Bloom Digital Marketing was generating consistent six-figure annual revenue. We had hired Julie as our part-time receptionist and administrative assistant, and we were considering bringing on another account coordinator to help manage our growing client load. We had established relationships with trusted freelancers for specialized services like graphic design and web development, creating a network of collaborators who shared our commitment to excellent work. The Columbia sportswear opportunity represented everything we had been working toward. It was the kind of account that could transform us from a successful small agency into a regionally recognized marketing firm. The contract value alone would double our annual revenue, but more importantly, the relationship could open doors to other enterprise-level clients who had previously been beyond our reach. When their marketing director, Jennifer, first reached out to us, I couldn't believe we were being considered alongside agencies with 10 times our resources and 20 times our experience. But as Megan and I prepared for our initial meeting, I realized that our small size and personalized approach might actually be advantages rather than limitations. Columbia Sportswear was looking for fresh perspectives on their digital marketing strategy. They wanted to connect with younger consumers who valued authenticity and sustainability, but their previous campaigns had felt generic and corporate. They needed partners who could help them tell their story in ways that would resonate with outdoor enthusiasts who saw through traditional advertising manipulation. The preliminary meeting went better than either of us had dared to hope. Jennifer was impressed by our strategic framework for positioning Columbia as a leader in sustainable outdoor gear rather than just another sportswear brand. She appreciated Megan's questions about their internal team dynamics and change management challenges. Most importantly, she seemed to understand that working with Bloom Digital Marketing would give Columbia access to senior-level strategic thinking without the overhead costs of a large agency. As we left that meeting, Megan and I were both buzzing with excitement and nervous energy. We knew we had a real chance to win the account, but we also knew that the final presentation would need to be flawless. This was our opportunity to prove that we belonged in the same conversation as the established agencies that had been dominating Portland's marketing landscape for decades. I spent the next 2 weeks developing the most comprehensive strategic proposal of my career. Market research, competitive analysis, audience segmentation, channel strategy, content planning, performance metrics, every aspect of Columbia's marketing. Challenge was addressed with detailed recommendations and implementation timelines. But beyond the technical components, I was crafting a vision for how Columbia could authentically connect with their target audience by aligning their marketing messages with their corporate values. Instead of trying to appeal to everyone, they would focus on building deep relationships with consumers who shared their commitment to environmental responsibility and outdoor adventure. Megan was simultaneously working on the relationship management and project coordination aspects of our proposal. She developed detailed communication protocols, project timelines, and team structures that would ensure smooth collaboration between Columbia's internal team and our agency. She also prepared responses to potential concerns about our capacity and experience level, demonstrating how our smaller size would actually enable more responsive and personalized service. The night before my trip to Sacramento, we stayed late at the office putting the finishing touches on our presentation materials. Everything felt perfect. The strategic framework was innovative but realistic. The creative concepts were compelling but achievable, and the project plan demonstrated our ability to deliver results on time and within budget. "This is going to change everything for us," Megan said as we packed up our materials that Friday evening. "Win or lose, we've proven that we can compete at this level." I agreed completely. Regardless of Columbia's final decision, the process of developing our proposal had clarified our vision for Bloom Digital Marketing's future growth. We were ready to take on larger clients and more complex challenges. We had the strategic capabilities, the relationship management skills, and the operational systems necessary to scale our business to the next level. That confidence made Megan's systematic betrayal even more devastating. She hadn't just stolen my ownership stake in a struggling startup. She had erased me from a thriving business that we had built together, and that was positioned for significant growth. The timing wasn't coincidental. She had waited until we were on the verge of our biggest success before removing me from the equation. As I finally walked up to my apartment after that horrible coffee meeting, I realized that Megan's resentment about recognition and client preferences had been building alongside our business success. The more we achieved, the more frustrated she became with her perception that I was receiving disproportionate credit for our shared accomplishments. But instead of addressing those feelings through honest conversation and partnership restructuring, she had chosen to solve the problem by eliminating me entirely. And she had done it at the moment when our 3 years of collaborative work was about to pay off in ways that would have benefited both of us. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. Megan had calculated that she would be better off owning 100% of a company that might lose some clients than owning 50% of a company that would continue to grow with my strategic contributions. It was a calculated risk that revealed how little she understood about what had really made Bloom Digital Marketing successful. And it was a mistake that I was already beginning to formulate plans to make her regret. Strike. The weekend after my devastating coffee meeting with Megan passed in a blur of sleepless nights and frantic research. I had until Friday to respond to her buyout offer, but I was determined to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making any decisions. What I discovered during those 3 days of investigation made me realize that the betrayal was even more calculated and extensive than I had initially understood. Saturday morning, I started by carefully reading every page of the buyout agreement Megan had presented. The legal language was complex, but the underlying message was clear. She was offering me roughly $40,000 for my 50% stake in a company that was generating over $200,000 in annual revenue and was positioned to potentially triple that with the Columbia Sportswear account. But the most shocking revelation came buried in the fine print of the asset valuation. According to the documentation, Bloom Digital Marketing's primary assets were listed as office, equipment, software licenses, and goodwill associated with existing client relationships. There was no mention of intellectual property, strategic frameworks, or the proprietary systems I had developed over the past 3 years. This wasn't just an insulting lowball offer, it was a systematic attempt to erase my contributions to the company's value. Megan was essentially arguing that my strategic work, process development, and client relationship building had no measurable worth beyond the office furniture and computer equipment. I spent Saturday afternoon combing through our business records, which I still had access to through my personal accounts and backup files. What I found made my stomach turn. Starting about 6 weeks ago, shortly after our preliminary meeting, with Columbia Sportswear, Megan had begun making subtle but significant changes to our business documentation. Client contracts that had previously listed both of our names were being renewed with only Megan's signature and contact information. Vendor agreements had been updated to reflect her as the sole authorized representative. Even our business insurance policies had been modified to remove me as a covered partner. Most disturbingly, I discovered that Megan had been systematically documenting client interactions in ways that minimized my role and elevated her own contributions. Internal project notes that had previously captured both of our input were being rewritten to suggest that strategic decisions had originated from her ideas rather than our collaborative discussions. She had been building a paper trail that would support her narrative about operational inefficiencies and justify her claim to sole ownership of client relationships. This wasn't a sudden decision made while I was in Sacramento. It was a carefully orchestrated plan that had been in development for at least a month and a half. Sunday, I decided to reach out to a few of our clients directly, not to badmouth Megan or interfere with their business relationships, but to get a clearer picture of how she had been presenting our partnership restructuring. What I learned confirmed my worst suspicions about the scope of her deception. Marcus from the bookstore was confused and concerned. "Sophia, Megan mentioned that you were taking a step back from client work to focus on administrative responsibilities. But you've been the one developing all our strategies and managing our campaigns. Is everything okay? Sarah from the sustainable clothing boutique was even more direct. I'm worried about what this means for our upcoming launch campaign. Megan couldn't answer any of my questions about the strategic framework we've been developing. She kept saying she would need to review the files and get back to me. Lisa from the bakery was the most revealing. Megan told me that you've been struggling with some personal issues that were affecting your work quality. She said she's been having to redo some of your campaign strategies because they weren't meeting client expectations. But that doesn't match my experience at all. Your work has always been excellent. The picture that emerged from these conversations was devastating. Megan hadn't just been positioning herself to take over the company. She had been actively undermining my reputation with our clients, preparing them for my departure by suggesting that my work was becoming unreliable and that she was already handling the important strategic decisions. This level of manipulation and deception went far beyond business rivalry or partnership disputes. Megan had been systematically damaging my professional reputation while smiling to my face and collaborating on daily business activities. She had been lying to our clients, our vendors, and presumably our employees about the nature of our partnership and my contributions to the company. The most chilling realization was how long this had been going on. 6 weeks of careful documentation, client manipulation, and relationship restructuring meant that Megan had been planning my elimination since shortly after we learned about the Columbia sportswear opportunity. She had recognized that landing that account would transform Bloom Digital Marketing into something much more valuable, and she had decided that she deserved to capture that value entirely for herself. By Sunday evening, I was furious. Not just hurt or disappointed, but genuinely angry at the depth of Megan's betrayal and the calculated nature of her deception. She had violated every principle of trust and partnership that we had built our business on. She had lied to clients who trusted us both, manipulated vendors and service providers, and systematically undermined 3 years of collaborative work. But underneath the anger, I was also beginning to feel something else: determination. Megan had made a fundamental miscalculation in her assessment of what made Bloom Digital Marketing valuable. She had focused so much on controlling client relationships and business contracts that she had overlooked the strategic expertise and deep industry knowledge that actually drove our results. She could steal the company name, the office space, and even some of our client contracts. But she couldn't steal my understanding of digital marketing strategy, my relationships with industry contacts, or my track record of developing campaigns that generated measurable business results. Monday morning, instead of wallowing in despair or immediately accepting her buyout offer, I started making phone calls. First to Elena Rodriguez, a business attorney who specialized in partnership disputes and had been recommended by one of my former colleagues. Then to David Kim, a commercial real estate agent who could help me understand my options for office space if I decided to start my own competing business. Elena's assessment of my legal options was mixed, but not entirely discouraging. While Megan had been clever about documenting her claim to client relationships, she had also made some mistakes that could potentially be challenged in court. More importantly, there was no non-compete clause in our original partnership agreement, which meant I was free to start my own marketing consultancy and compete directly with Bloom Digital Marketing. The question isn't whether you have legal grounds to fight her, Elena explained during our phone consultation. The question is whether you want to spend the next 2 years in litigation, or whether you'd rather focus your energy on building something new that she can't touch. David's perspective on commercial real estate was more immediately encouraging. The Portland market had several affordable office options that could accommodate a small but growing marketing consultancy. More importantly, he knew of at least 3 other small business owners who were currently looking for marketing services and might be interested in working with someone who could provide personalized attention and strategic expertise. By Monday evening, I was beginning to see a path forward that didn't involve accepting Megan's insulting buyout offer or engaging in a lengthy legal battle that would drain my resources and energy. Instead of trying to fight for my share of bloom, digital marketing, I could build something new that reflected my own values and strategic vision. But before I made any final decisions, I wanted to gather more information about how Megan was handling the transition and whether her claims about operational improvements were actually being reflected in client satisfaction and business performance. Tuesday morning, I drove past our office building and parked across the street, watching the entrance for about an hour. What I saw confirmed my suspicions about Megan's capacity to manage the strategic aspects of our client work. Julie, our receptionist, looked stressed and overwhelmed as she carried stacks of files between the office and her car. A delivery person waited at the front desk for almost 15 minutes before someone came to sign for packages that usually would have been processed immediately. Most telling, I saw Jennifer from Columbia Sportswear enter the building for what I assumed was a follow-up meeting about our proposal. She stayed for less than 30 minutes, much shorter than the detailed strategy sessions we typically had with major clients. When she left, her body language suggested frustration or disappointment. Megan's deception or waiting to see how badly she would mishandle our existing client relationships, I decided to take control of my own future. I called Elena Rodriguez back and told her I wanted to decline the buyout offer and pursue the option of starting my own competing business. I need to send Megan a response that makes it clear I'm not intimidated by her tactics and that I'm prepared to compete directly with her, I told Elena during our Tuesday afternoon call. Elena helped me craft a professional but firm response that declined the buyout offer and formally notified Megan that I would be starting my own marketing consultancy. The letter was carefully worded to avoid any accusations that could potentially create legal liability, but it made my position crystal clear. Dear Megan, the letter began, after careful consideration of your buyout proposal, I have decided to decline your offer to purchase my equity stake in Bloom Digital Marketing. While I understand your desire to restructure our business arrangement, I believe that my professional future lies in pursuing independent opportunities that will allow me to fully utilize my strategic expertise and client relationship management skills. The letter continued by formally notifying her that I would be establishing Sophia Chen Strategic Marketing within 30 days, and that I would be offering comprehensive digital marketing services to small and medium-sized businesses throughout the Portland metropolitan area. It concluded with a professional but pointed statement about my commitment to maintaining the highest standards of client service and strategic excellence that had been my hallmark throughout my career. Elena advised me to send the letter via certified mail to create a formal record of our communication, and to copy our business attorney on the correspondence to make it clear that I had legal representation for any future disputes. Wednesday morning, I took another significant step toward establishing my independence. I reached out to 3 of our former clients who had expressed concern about the partnership changes, Marcus, Sarah, and Lisa, and requested brief meetings to discuss their current marketing needs and how I might be able to assist them as an independent consultant. The response was immediately encouraging. All 3 were eager to meet with me, and their enthusiasm suggested that Megan's attempts to position herself as the primary strategic voice had not been successful. Marcus was particularly direct during our phone conversation. Sophia, I'll be honest with you. The campaign strategies Megan has been presenting since you've been away don't feel like the same quality of work we've been getting for the past 2 years. They're more generic, less tailored to our specific challenges. If you're starting your own business, I'd definitely be interested in hearing about your services. Sarah from the Sustainable Clothing Boutique was even more enthusiastic. I've been waiting to hear from you directly. Megan keeps promising to get back to me with revised strategy documents, but it's been over a week now, and I still haven't seen anything. My launch timeline is getting tight, and I need someone who can move quickly with high-quality work. Lisa's response made me realize just how much damage Megan's transition had already caused to client relationships. Sophia, I'm so relieved to hear from you. I was starting to worry that there was something seriously wrong with the business. The communication has been so scattered and unprofessional compared to what we're used to. I'd love to meet and talk about continuing to work with you directly. By Wednesday evening, I had scheduled 3 client meetings for Thursday and Friday, and I was beginning to feel optimistic about my prospects for building a successful independent consultancy. The clients who had worked directly with me understood the value of my strategic expertise and were willing to follow me to a new business relationship. But I also knew that Megan wouldn't take my rejection of her buyout offer quietly. Her response came Thursday morning in the form of a phone call that revealed just how unprepared she was for direct competition. "Sophia," she said, her voice tight with anger and stress, "I got your letter yesterday. I think you're making a serious mistake." "I don't think so, Megan," I replied calmly. "I think I'm making the best decision for my professional future." "You can't just steal our clients," she continued, her corporate facade completely abandoned now. "We have contracts with these businesses. We have established relationships. You can't just poach them because you're angry about the buyout terms." Her use of the word "our" was particularly galling, considering that she had spent the past 6 weeks systematically removing me from every aspect of client relationship management. "I'm not stealing anyone, Megan. I'm offering my services to business owners who are free to work with whatever marketing consultant they choose. If they prefer to continue working with Bloom Digital Marketing, they're certainly welcome to do that. But you know they'll choose to work with you because you've been doing all the strategic work," she said, and for the first time I heard genuine fear in her voice. "That's not fair competition." The irony was almost unbearable. Megan was accusing me of unfair competition because clients preferred working with the person who had actually been developing their strategies and managing their campaigns, while she was the one who had attempted to steal the entire company through deception and manipulation. "Megan," I said, keeping my voice level and professional, "you made a choice to restructure our partnership without consulting me. You attempted to buy me out at a fraction of my actual contribution's value. You systematically removed me from client relationships and business operations. I'm simply responding to your business decisions by pursuing my own independent path. This is going to destroy everything we built together," she said, her voice now shifting toward desperation. "No, Megan, you already destroyed what we built together. I'm just refusing to let you bury me in the rubble." The call ended with Megan threatening to pursue legal action to prevent me from competing with Bloom Digital Marketing, but Elena had already assured me that I was well within my rights to start an independent business and compete for clients in the open market. Thursday afternoon, I met with Marcus at his bookstore to discuss his marketing needs and how I could help him as an independent consultant. The conversation was eye-opening in terms of how much Megan's transition had already damaged client confidence in Bloom Digital Marketing. "Sophia, I have to tell you, the past 2 weeks have been really concerning," Marcus began as we sat in the small cafe area of his bookstore. "Ever since you've been away, the communication has been completely different. Megan keeps promising to send me revised strategy documents, but when I finally receive them, they're just generic templates that don't address any of the specific challenges we've been working on." He pulled out his laptop and showed me the campaign materials Megan had sent him the previous week. I was shocked by what I saw. The strategic framework was superficial and generic, nothing like the detailed, data-driven approaches I had been developing for his business over the past 18 months. The content suggestions were basic and unimaginative, and the performance metrics were standard industry benchmarks rather than the customized goals we had established based on his specific business objectives. "This isn't the quality of work you've been paying for," I told him honestly. "I don't know if Megan was rushed or if she's trying to handle too many accounts simultaneously, but this doesn't represent the strategic thinking that has been driving your results." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I was afraid of. My revenue growth has been so consistent since we started working with Bloom Digital Marketing, but it's directly tied to the sophisticated strategies you've been developing. I can't afford to go backward to generic marketing approaches that might work for any business. We spent the next hour discussing his specific needs and how I could support his business goals as an independent consultant. By the end of our meeting, Marcus had agreed to work with Sophia Chen's strategic marketing beginning the following month, with a contract value that was actually higher than what he had been paying Bloom Digital Marketing. Friday morning brought similar conversations with Sarah and Lisa, both of whom were eager to continue working with me rather than risk their business growth on Megan's unproven ability to handle strategic marketing independently. Sarah was particularly emphatic about her decision. "Sophia, I'm a small business owner with limited resources and a narrow window for success," she explained during our coffee meeting. "I can't afford to be anyone's learning experiment. You've proven that you understand my business model, my target audience, and my growth challenges. Why would I risk working with someone who's still figuring out how to do the job you've already mastered?" By Friday afternoon, I had secured 3 client contracts that would provide enough revenue to cover my basic business expenses for the first 6 months of independent operation. More importantly, I had confirmed that the value of Bloom Digital marketing wasn't tied to the company name or office space. It was tied to the strategic expertise and client relationships that I had been building for 3 years. That evening, I received a text message from Megan that marked the end of any pretense of professional civility between us. "Sophia, you're making a huge mistake. You have no idea how much work goes into running a business beyond just the strategy. Development. When you fail, don't expect me to welcome you back." I stared at that message for a long time, struck by how completely Megan misunderstood what had made our partnership successful. She genuinely believed that the administrative and operational aspects of running the business were more challenging and valuable than the strategic work that had attracted and retained our clients. Her threat about my inevitable failure revealed that she still didn't understand the fundamental dynamics of the marketing consulting industry. Clients didn't choose agencies based on their office space or business operations. They chose consultants based on results. And results came from strategic expertise, not from filing systems and vendor relationships. I responded with a simple, professional message. "Thank you for your feedback, Megan. I wish you success with Bloom Digital Marketing." Saturday morning, I drove to a small office space in the Pearl District that David Kim had recommended. It was a fraction of the size of our former office, but it was bright, affordable, and available for immediate occupancy. As I signed the lease agreement, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: genuine excitement about my professional future. For the first time since returning from Sacramento, I wasn't reacting to Megan's betrayal or trying to salvage something from the wreckage of our partnership. I was building something new that belonged entirely to me, something that reflected my own values and strategic vision without requiring compromise or collaboration with someone who had proven herself untrustworthy. Sunday evening, I sat in my new office space, surrounded by boxes of personal items I had retrieved from our former shared workspace, and began planning the launch of Sophia Chen's strategic marketing. I had 3 confirmed clients, a clear service offering, and a deep understanding of what small business owners needed from their marketing partners. But most importantly, I had learned something valuable about my own capabilities and professional worth. Megan's attempt to erase me from our shared business had forced me to prove to myself that my contributions had been essential to our success. The ease with which our best clients had chosen to follow me rather than stay with her confirmed that the real value of our partnership had been my strategic expertise, not her relationship management or business operations. The betrayal that had seemed devastating just 1 week earlier was beginning to feel like an unexpected opportunity. Megan had given me the push I needed to pursue independent success without the constraints of partnership compromise or the anxiety of wondering whether my contributions were truly valued. As I packed up my laptop that Sunday evening, I realized that I was no longer angry at Megan for trying to steal my company. Instead, I was grateful to her for forcing me to discover that I didn't need her permission or partnership to build something successful. I had the skills, the relationships, and the strategic vision necessary to compete directly with her, and I was confident that the market would quickly demonstrate which of us truly understood what clients valued in a marketing partnership. The first strike had been Megan's, but she had fundamentally miscalculated the nature of the battle she was starting. She thought she was stealing a company, but what she had actually done was liberate her most dangerous competitor from any obligation to hold back or compromise. The real competition was just beginning, and I was no longer fighting to preserve something we had built together. I was fighting to prove that everything valuable about our partnership had been mine all along. The week after I officially launched, Sophia Chen's strategic marketing brought revelations that made me understand just how deeply Megan's betrayal extended beyond our professional relationship. What I discovered during those first days of independent operation wasn't just about stolen business contracts or manipulated client relationships. It was about a systematic campaign to isolate me from our entire professional network and damage my reputation throughout Portland's marketing community. Tuesday morning, I received a phone call from Amanda Torres, the president of the Portland Marketing Professionals Association. Amanda and I had developed a friendly relationship over the past 2 years through various industry events, and she had always been supportive of both Megan's and my involvement in the association. "Sophia," Amanda said, her voice carefully neutral, "I'm calling because there's been some confusion about your membership status with our organization. Megan contacted me last week to request that your membership be transferred to an inactive status, citing some personal issues that were affecting your ability to participate in professional activities." I felt my stomach drop. The Portland Marketing Professionals Association wasn't just a networking organization. It was my primary connection to industry trends, professional development opportunities, and potential client referrals. My active membership and regular participation in their events had been crucial to establishing my credibility in the local market. "Amanda," I said carefully, "I'm not sure what Megan told you, but I haven't experienced any personal issues that would affect my professional capabilities. In fact, I just launched my own marketing consultancy, and I'm more committed than ever to staying actively involved in the association." There was a long pause before Amanda responded. "Sophia, this is awkward. Megan mentioned that you had been struggling with some family responsibilities that were creating performance issues at work. She also suggested that you might be dealing with some emotional stability concerns related to the stress of running a business." Emotional stability concerns. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Megan hadn't just been undermining my professional reputation with clients. She had been spreading rumors about my mental health and personal reliability throughout our entire professional community. "Amanda, I need you to understand that everything Megan told you is completely false," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I recently discovered that she has been systematically attempting to remove me from our shared business through deception and manipulation. What she described to you as personal issues were actually the result of her hostile takeover attempts." Amanda's discomfort was audible through the phone. "Sophia, I really don't want to get involved in business partnership disputes, but I do need to know, are you saying that Megan deliberately provided false information about your professional status?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, and I can provide documentation to support everything I'm telling you." We agreed to meet later that week so I could present evidence of Megan's deceptive practices and restore my active membership status. But the damage had already been done. Amanda's initial willingness to believe Megan's version of events suggested that similar conversations had probably taken place with other professional contacts throughout the Portland marketing community. Wednesday brought confirmation of my worst fears. I received an email from Trevor McDonald, the director of the Small Business Development Center, where I had been volunteering as a marketing consultant for local entrepreneurs. The message was brief and formal. "Due to recent concerns raised about your availability and professional capacity, we have decided to suspend your volunteer consulting privileges pending review of your current status." I immediately called Trevor to demand an explanation. His response revealed the scope of Megan's reputation sabotage campaign. "Sophia, Megan Walsh contacted me last Friday to express concerns about your recent behavior and professional reliability. She mentioned that you had been missing important client meetings, delivering substandard work, and showing signs of personal stress that were affecting your judgment. As someone who has worked closely with you for several years, she felt obligated to warn us that you might not be in a position to provide effective consulting services to vulnerable small business owners." The calculated cruelty of Megan's approach was breathtaking. She had weaponized her knowledge of my professional relationships and community involvement to systematically damage my reputation before I even had a chance to defend myself. By positioning herself as a concerned friend who was reluctantly reporting troubling behavior, she had made her lies seem credible and motivated by genuine care rather than competitive malice. "Trevor," I said, struggling to maintain my composure, "I need you to consider the possibility that Megan's concerns are not motivated by professional ethics, but by business competition. She recently attempted to force me out of our shared company, and I declined her buyout offer to start my own competing business. Her reports about my performance and reliability are part of a deliberate campaign to damage my professional reputation." Trevor was more receptive to my explanation than Amanda had been, but he still insisted on conducting a formal review before reinstating my volunteer privileges. "Sophia, I hope you understand that we have to take any concerns about consultant performance seriously. If what you're saying is true, then we'll certainly want to correct the record. But we need to follow our established procedures for investigating these types of allegations." Thursday, I decided to take a more proactive approach to understanding the extent of Megan's reputation sabotage. I reached out to several mutual professional contacts to gauge whether they had received similar warnings about my reliability and performance. The responses were both enlightening and infuriating. Karen Phillips, a graphic designer we had frequently collaborated with, had been told that I was going through a difficult personal situation that was affecting my work quality. James Rodriguez, a web developer who had referred several clients to us, had heard that I was struggling with the stress of business ownership and might not be available for new projects. Even Maria Santos, the owner of the co-working space where I had occasionally held client meetings, had been warned that I was experiencing some professional difficulties that might make me unreliable as a tenant. Each conversation revealed the same pattern. Megan had systematically contacted our mutual professional network to plant seeds of doubt about my competence, reliability, and mental stability. She had done it gradually and subtly, positioning herself as a concerned friend rather than a business rival, making her warnings seem credible and well-intentioned. But what made the campaign particularly insidious was how she had tailored her messages to each specific relationship. To the marketing association, she emphasized concerns about my ability to participate professionally. To the Small Business Development Center, she focused on my potential impact on vulnerable entrepreneurs. To potential collaborators, she highlighted my unreliability as a business partner. By Thursday evening, I was furious but also impressed by the sophistication of Megan's strategy. She had recognized that simply stealing our shared clients wouldn't be enough to ensure her success. She needed to prevent me from building a competing business by destroying my professional reputation before I could establish independent credibility. Friday morning brought the most devastating revelation yet. I received a phone call from Jennifer Patterson, the marketing director at Columbia Sportswear, whose account represented the potential transformation of our business trajectory. "Sophia," Jennifer said, her voice professional but concerned, "I'm calling because we've decided to postpone our decision about the marketing agency selection. We've received some conflicting information about the status of Bloom Digital Marketing, and we want to clarify the situation before moving forward." My heart sank. The Columbia Sportswear account wasn't just valuable for its immediate revenue potential. It was the kind of high-profile client that could establish credibility for my new independent consultancy and attract other enterprise-level opportunities. Jennifer, I'd be happy to clarify anything about my current professional status, I said carefully. As I mentioned in my recent correspondence, I've recently launched Sophia Chen Strategic Marketing, and I'm available to work with Columbia Sportswear, either independently or in collaboration with other agencies. Well, that's part of what's confusing, Jennifer replied. Megan Walsh contacted me earlier this week to inform me that you were no longer available for professional consulting due to some personal issues that were affecting your work capacity. She also mentioned that the strategic work you had been doing for Bloom Digital Marketing had required significant revision and oversight to meet client standards. The blood drained from my face. Megan hadn't just been sabotaging my reputation. With local networking contacts, she had directly undermined my credibility with the most important potential client either of us had ever pursued. Jennifer, I said, choosing my words very carefully, I need you to understand that Megan's characterization of my professional status is not accurate. We recently experienced a business partnership dissolution, and I believe her concerns about my capabilities are motivated by competitive rather than professional considerations. I see, Jennifer said, though her tone suggested confusion rather than understanding. This is quite unusual. In our experience, business partners who are separating professionally typically maintain a more collaborative approach to client transitions. She was right, of course. Professional partnerships that ended amicably typically involved coordinated communication with clients and mutual respect for each other's contributions. Megan's decision to actively sabotage my reputation with potential clients revealed the depth of her determination to eliminate me as a competitive threat. Jennifer, would it be possible for me to provide you with documentation of my work on the Columbia Sportswear proposal, along with references from clients who can speak to the quality and reliability of my strategic consulting? I think that would be helpful, she agreed. To be honest, we were quite impressed with the strategic framework that was presented in your initial proposal. If you were primarily responsible for that work, we'd certainly want to consider working with you. Directly, after ending the call, I sat in my new office feeling simultaneously devastated and determined. Megan's sabotage campaign had been more extensive and more effective than I had initially realized. She hadn't just stolen our shared business. She had systematically attempted to destroy my ability to compete with her by poisoning my professional relationships throughout the Portland market. But her overreach had also created an opportunity. By contacting Columbia Sportswear directly and making false claims about my work quality, she had crossed a line from competitive business practices into potentially actionable defamation. More importantly, she had revealed that she was genuinely threatened by my decision to compete with her independently. That afternoon, I called Elena Rodriguez to discuss the legal implications of Megan's reputation sabotage campaign. Elena's assessment was sobering but not entirely discouraging. Sophia, what you're describing could potentially constitute business defamation, especially if you can prove that her false statements about your professional capabilities have resulted in lost business opportunities. The challenge is documenting the specific economic damages and proving that her statements were knowingly false, rather than based on genuine concerns. Elena advised me to begin documenting every instance of Megan's reputation sabotage, including the specific false statements she had made and the business opportunities that had been affected. But she also cautioned that pursuing legal action would be time-consuming and expensive, and might not be the most effective way to rebuild my professional reputation. The most powerful response to false allegations about your work quality is demonstrating excellent work quality, Elena explained. If you can quickly establish a track record of success with your independent consultancy, that will be more convincing than any legal judgment. Friday evening, I made a decision that would define my approach to competing with Megan and rebuilding my professional reputation. Instead of focusing my energy on defending against her sabotage campaign, I would concentrate on delivering exceptional results for my existing clients and building new relationships that would speak to my competence and reliability. I spent the weekend developing a comprehensive strategy for professional reputation recovery. First, I would provide Jennifer Patterson with detailed documentation of my work on the Columbia Sportswear proposal, along with testimonials from clients who could verify my strategic capabilities and professional reliability. Second, I would reach out to each professional contact who had received false information from Megan, providing evidence of my actual work quality and explaining the competitive motivations behind her warnings. Third, I would focus on delivering exceptional results for Marcus, Sarah, and Lisa, ensuring that their success stories could serve as powerful testimonials for my independent capabilities. Most importantly, I would refuse to engage in the same reputation sabotage tactics that Megan had employed. My competitive advantage wouldn't come from undermining her credibility, but from demonstrating superior strategic thinking and client service. By Sunday evening, I felt more confident and focused than I had since returning from Sacramento. Megan's betrayal had been devastating, and her sabotage campaign had been sophisticated and effective. But she had also made a fundamental miscalculation about the nature of professional reputation in the marketing consulting industry. Reputation wasn't built through networking manipulation or competitive sabotage. It was built through consistent delivery of excellent work. And while Megan had been focused on destroying my relationships with existing contacts, I would be focused on building new relationships based on demonstrated results, rather than social manipulation. The battle for professional credibility was just beginning, but I was no longer fighting to preserve something that could be stolen. I was fighting to prove something that could only be earned through competence, integrity, and superior strategic thinking. And in that kind of competition, I was confident about my chances for success. The Monday morning after my devastating discovery of Megan's reputation sabotage campaign, I arrived at my new office determined to take control of the narrative surrounding my professional capabilities. But what I found waiting in my email inbox revealed that Megan's systematic destruction of my business relationships had escalated to a level that threatened not just my reputation, but my ability to operate as an independent consultant at all. The first message was from Portland Business Bank, where I had maintained accounts for both personal and business banking for over 5 years. The subject line read, "Account review required, immediate action needed." "Dear Ms. Chen," the message began, "we have received information suggesting that your business accounts may be associated with unresolved partnership disputes and potential financial irregularities. As a precautionary measure, we have temporarily frozen your business banking privileges, pending review of your account status and resolution of any outstanding legal or financial obligations." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Megan had somehow convinced my bank to freeze my business accounts based on unspecified concerns about financial irregularities. Without access to business banking, I couldn't process client payments, pay vendors, or handle any of the basic financial transactions necessary to operate a consulting business. The second email was from my business insurance provider, informing me that my professional liability coverage had been canceled due to material changes in risk assessment based on new information about your professional practices and potential exposure to client disputes. The third message was from the building management company for my new office space, requesting immediate clarification about my current legal and professional status, following concerns raised by a professional colleague about my ability to maintain commercial lease obligations. By 9:30 that morning, I realized that Megan hadn't just been spreading rumors about my professional capabilities. She had been systematically contacting every business service provider I relied on to suggest that working with me represented an unacceptable risk exposure. I immediately called Elena Rodriguez to discuss the legal implications of what appeared to be a coordinated campaign of business interference. Elena's response was grimmer than I had expected. "Sophia, what you're describing goes beyond defamation. into potential tortious interference with business relationships. If Megan is deliberately contacting your vendors and service providers to disrupt your ability to operate a business, that could constitute illegal interference with your economic prospects. But Elena also warned me that proving deliberate interference would require documentation of Megan's communications with each affected business, and that obtaining such evidence might be difficult given confidentiality considerations. The immediate priority is restoring your access to essential business services, Elena advised. We can address the legal aspects of Megan's interference later, but right now you need banking, insurance, and office space to operate your consultancy. I spent the rest of Monday making phone calls to each affected service provider, explaining that I was the victim of a malicious misinformation campaign by a competitor who was attempting to interfere with my business operations. The responses were mixed but generally sympathetic. Portland Business Bank agreed to schedule an emergency review meeting for Wednesday morning, where I could provide documentation of my financial stability and address whatever concerns had been raised about my accounts. My insurance provider was more skeptical but agreed to reconsider my coverage if I could provide evidence that the reported concerns about my professional practices were unfounded. The building management company was the most understanding, probably because they had dealt with similar situations involving disgruntled business partners and competitive interference. They agreed to disregard the anonymous concerns that had been raised and confirmed that my lease agreement remained in good standing. Tuesday brought additional evidence of how extensively Megan had weaponized her knowledge of my professional relationships. I received a phone call from David Kim, the commercial real estate agent who had helped me find my office space. "Sophia," David said, his voice concerned. "I got a strange call yesterday from someone claiming to be a former business partner of yours. She suggested that you might be having financial difficulties that could affect your ability to maintain your lease obligations, and she recommended that I monitor your account more closely for signs of payment problems." David hadn't taken the call seriously because he had already verified my financial capacity during the lease application process. But the fact that Megan had contacted him revealed how thoroughly she had researched my business relationships to identify potential pressure points. "David, the person who called you is my former business partner, and she's been conducting a systematic campaign to interfere with my ability to operate an independent consulting business. I want you to know that my financial situation is stable, and that any concerns she raised about my reliability are motivated by competitive rather than legitimate business considerations." David assured me that he had no concerns about my lease obligations, but he also warned me that similar calls to other business contacts could potentially cause more serious problems if the recipients were less skeptical or less familiar with my actual financial situation. Tuesday afternoon, I decided to take a more aggressive approach to documenting Megan's interference campaign. I called each of the business service providers who had contacted me about account reviews or coverage, cancellations, requesting specific information about what concerns had been raised and by whom. The information I gathered was damning. In each case, Megan had contacted the service provider directly, identified herself as my former business partner, and raised specific concerns that were carefully calibrated to trigger risk management protocols. To the bank, she had suggested that I was involved in unresolved financial disputes that could affect my ability to meet business obligations. To the insurance company, she had implied that my work practices created elevated liability risks that hadn't been properly disclosed during the application process. To the building management company, she had warned that I might be facing legal action that could disrupt my lease payments. Each communication had been professional and appeared to be motivated by legitimate business concerns rather than competitive malice. But taken together, they represented a coordinated attack on every aspect of my ability to operate an independent business. Wednesday morning's meeting with Portland Business Bank provided the most detailed insight into Megan's tactics. The account manager, Robert Chen, explained that they had received a formal written complaint about my business practices from a professional colleague with intimate knowledge of your financial management and client relationships. The complaint suggested that you had been engaging in questionable billing practices with shared clients, that you might be attempting to divert business assets from a legitimate partnership, and that your new business entity might be an attempt to avoid financial obligations from your previous business relationships, Robert explained. He showed me a copy of the complaint, which was written on Bloom digital marketing letterhead and signed by Megan in her capacity as managing partner. The document was sophisticated and professional, presenting her allegations as objective business concerns rather than competitive sabotage. But the specific details revealed that Megan had access to confidential information about my banking history and financial transactions that she shouldn't have been able to obtain through legitimate channels. She had referenced specific account numbers, transaction dates, and client payment patterns that suggested she had been monitoring my financial activities without authorization. "Robert," I said carefully, "I need you to understand that the person who filed this complaint is engaged in a deliberate campaign to interfere with my business operations following a contentious partnership dissolution. The allegations she's made are false, and her access to my confidential banking information may constitute a violation of financial privacy regulations." I provided Robert with documentation of my client contracts, business registration, and financial projections, along with Elena Rodriguez's contact information for legal verification of my business legitimacy. After reviewing the materials, Robert agreed to restore my banking privileges immediately and to investigate how Megan had obtained access to confidential account information. Wednesday afternoon brought a breakthrough that would fundamentally change my understanding of Megan's capabilities and resources. I received a phone call from Julie, our former receptionist at Bloom Digital Marketing, who sounded nervous and conflicted. "Sophia," Julie said quietly, "I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I think you should know what's been happening at the office since you left." Julie explained that Megan had been working with a business consultant named Richard Morrison, who specialized in competitive intelligence and market positioning for emerging agencies. Richard had been helping Megan develop strategies for eliminating competitive threats and consolidating her market position. "Sophia, I think they've been researching all of your professional relationships and business connections. I've seen Richard making lists of your contacts and discussing ways to neutralize your competitive advantages. Some of the conversations I've overheard have made me really uncomfortable." Julie also revealed that Megan had been monitoring my social media activity, tracking my client meetings, and even conducting informal surveillance of my new office location to gather information about my business operations. Yesterday, Richard suggested that they should consider hiring a private investigator to gather more detailed information about your financial situation and personal relationships. That's when I decided I had to call you. The revelation that Megan was working with a professional business consultant to systematically destroy my ability to compete changed everything about my understanding of what I was facing. This wasn't just a personal betrayal by a former friend and business partner. It was a coordinated campaign of business warfare designed to eliminate me as a competitive threat through any means necessary. Thursday morning, I called Elena Rodriguez to discuss the legal implications of professional surveillance and competitive intelligence gathering. Elena's assessment was sobering, but also provided some strategic clarity. "Sophia, if Megan is paying consultants to gather information about your business operations and personal relationships for the purpose of interfering with your client relationships and vendor partnerships, that could constitute several different types of illegal business interference. But proving her intent and documenting the specific actions would require a significant legal investigation." Elena recommended that I begin documenting every instance of apparent surveillance or information gathering, and that I consider hiring my own professional investigator to gather evidence of Megan's activities. The challenge is that this type of business warfare can be very expensive to defend against, even when you ultimately prevail. Megan may be betting that you don't have the resources to fight a prolonged campaign of interference and intimidation. Thursday afternoon, I made a decision that would define my response to Megan's escalated attacks. Instead of trying to match her tactics or engage in the same type of competitive warfare, I would focus my energy and resources on building a business that was strong enough to withstand her interference attempts. I reached out to each of my 3 confirmed clients, Marcus, Sarah, and Lisa, to inform them about the competitive interference I was experiencing and to ensure that they understood any disruptions to my business services were the result of external sabotage rather than operational problems. The response was immediately supportive and actually strengthened my client relationships. Marcus was particularly emphatic about his commitment to working with me despite any attempts to interfere with our business relationship. Sophia, the fact that your former partner is going to such lengths to prevent you from competing tells me everything I need to know about the quality of your work and the threat you represent to her business. I'm not interested in working with someone who uses these kinds of tactics. Sarah's response was equally encouraging. Sophia, I'm a small business owner myself, and I understand how destructive this type of competitive interference can be. But I also know that the best response to unfair competition is superior service and better results. If you can deliver what you've promised despite these challenges, that actually makes me more confident in your capabilities. By Thursday evening, I realized that Megan's escalated campaign of business interference had actually created an unexpected opportunity. Her tactics were so extreme and so obviously motivated by competitive desperation that they were damaging her own reputation among the professional contacts who were witnessing her behavior. Several people who had received her warnings about my reliability had subsequently learned about her systematic interference campaign and had begun questioning her credibility and professional ethics. The small business community in Portland was tightly connected, and word was spreading about her aggressive tactics. Friday morning brought confirmation that Megan's strategy was beginning to backfire. I received a phone call from Amanda Torres at the Portland Marketing Professionals Association, who had completed her investigation into my membership status. Sophia, Amanda said, after reviewing the documentation you provided and conducting some additional research into the situation, we've determined that the concerns raised about your professional status were unfounded and potentially motivated by competitive rather than professional considerations. Amanda also revealed that several other association members had approached her with concerns about Megan's behavior and her attempts to manipulate professional relationships for competitive advantage. Frankly, Sophia, the tactics you've described are not consistent with the professional standards we expect from our members. We're going to be having a conversation with Megan about appropriate business practices and industry ethics. By Friday afternoon, I understood that Megan's campaign of systematic interference had been both more extensive and more self-defeating than either of us had initially recognized. Her desperation to eliminate me as a competitor had led her to tactics that were damaging her own professional reputation and potentially exposing her to legal liability. But more importantly, her attacks had forced me to build a stronger, more resilient business structure that could withstand competitive pressure and external interference. The clients who had chosen to work with me despite her sabotage attempts were more committed and more valuable than those who might have been easily influenced by rumors or misinformation. As I locked up my office that Friday evening, I realized that Megan had inadvertently done me a favor. Her extreme tactics had revealed the depth of her insecurity about competing with me on the basis of service quality and strategic expertise. And her willingness to risk her own professional reputation to eliminate me as a threat had demonstrated to the entire Portland business community which of us truly understood the principles of ethical competition and client service. The complete takeover she had attempted wasn't just failing. It was transforming me into a stronger and more determined competitor than she had ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.